Galatians 4:21. Tell me, you who want to be under the law, are you not aware of what the law says? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by the slave woman and the other by the free woman. His son by the slave woman was born in the ordinary way, but his son by the free woman was born as a result of a promise. These things are an allegory, or may be taken figuratively. So there's a strange little story in the middle of Galatians where Paul is in the middle of a big wrangle between law and grace, and which the young Christians who live there are going to follow. And Paul has established grace as a huge, central, dominating principle. And then these guys have come along and confused everybody and said, but you've got to follow the law as well. So Paul is coming back with a vengeance to try and figure it out. Now, without freedom, we would be miserable. And that works in a political state or in an emotional state, and it also works in a spiritual condition, doesn't it? Without freedom, we are miserable. When you feel constricted, you are tense. And Calvin said, how many there are who are still in bondage as if they have a noose tied around their necks. Do you know people like that? And Paul was in torment. These people should be free and happy and enjoying the gospel of liberty, and instead they were turning into this smug Pharisees, counting the rules. It was depressing. So Paul tells this story, and he talks about Abraham, who everybody knows, and who probably the people who were confusing these young Christians were referring to big time. So he uses their ammunition against them. Do you follow me? So Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. And God had promised Abraham a son, and when it seemed unlikely to happen, with Abraham being somewhat of a pensioner, Abraham took affairs into his own hands and had this child, Ishmael. So he stepped outside God's promise zone to figure it out for himself. He did it by human effort. Then along comes Isaac. So, Paul says, think of it this way. Ishmael is the result of human effort, and Isaac is the result of promise. And really it's almost back to flesh and spirit, law and grace, what I try to do and what God gives, set in opposition against each other. And then he colours in the outline in an odd little way. He says the two mums, Hagar and Sarah, represent the two covenants, basically Old Covenant and New Covenant. And the Old Covenant is connected with Sinai, where the law was given in the Old Testament, and Sarah represents Jerusalem, or not the Jerusalem, the contemporary Jerusalem, but the Jerusalem which is above, the ideal picture of freedom. Okay, and they represent the two covenants. You either live by one covenant or the other. And he calls Sarah, she is the mother of us all, and us is the freeborn children of promise. Now he calls it an allegory. So he's not saying this is the literal meaning of the Old Testament. There are lots of people who make loads of money telling you just crazy things about the Bible. Absolutely astonishing. It's difficult to be polite. But Paul doesn't say this is the actual meaning of the Bible. He says it's an allegory, it's figuratively speaking. He's using a familiar story to point to something that is serious and important, and it's what the confusers were emphasizing. He's saying, you heard, I can play that game as well. You heard what they're saying? Well, this is the real thing, okay? Think of the two sons, think of two ways of living, think of the two mothers, think of two covenants. You either live under law or under grace. There ain't no middle road. You're either a Pharisee or a Christian. You're either a legalizer or a grace person. You don't get any other choice. Okay, but the question comes up, wasn't he rubbishing the law here? And this is a key issue when you're thinking about Paul's letters. But the answer is no. He was rubbishing the way that these confusing people had misrepresented the law. They got it the wrong way round. If you're a follower of Hagar, you say, then you're trying to win approval by human effort. And you simply won't make it. Come on, count yourself down by the Ten Commandments and see how far you get. We all break the law. The law shows how much we need grace. It emphasizes, it shows our shortcomings. All have fallen short. If you think that you're trying to gain God's approval by being a goody two-shoes, don't do it. It won't work. My goodness. All we can do is follow Sarah. The promise is sheer gifts. No. Listen carefully. The law is a wonderful blueprint for life, but it doesn't operate to make you acceptable to God. It shows that you cannot make yourself acceptable to God. Hagar, and the story of Hagar, read it for yourself in Genesis. It represents the tragedy that you unleash in your own life if you try to run your own life your own way. And the irony for the Galatians was that they'd received the free gift of life and grace, and then they'd gone back to this smug Phariseeism. He said, man, you've lost the plot. How can you run a Christian life by rules? It's just so sad. Some Christians are anxiety-ridden, guilt trippers with faces like lemons. They look totally constipated the whole time. You don't want to live like that. God has called you to be free. Therefore, stand fast in the liberty to which he's called you. We have an inheritance. It was obtained at enormous cost and not at all by our own efforts. It can only be obtained through the one to whom it belongs. And he confers it on us as a free gift. Don't try and gain God's approval by being nice. You just won't do it. Amen. Do you hear it? It's grace. God bless you.